Welcome back, Olathe students. This week we're going to talk about some Civil War battles. So that brings us to the question, what does make one Civil War battle more important than another? Why should we study one over the other? Well, the Civil War has had over 10,000 battles, many of which entire books have been written about just to cover one of those battles. So for us, in a 5-minute video, we will try to just cover a few. So how do we decide what battle is important? In some ways, it's the first or maybe the last battle, the biggest or maybe the longest, the most lopsided, and yes, to all those, but also ones that help make political change, or maybe where the battle took place, and probably the most important, what battle changes the direction of the momentum? Who is now moving towards winning the war? As we start to talk about Civil War battles, it's important to know that there are two main armies that will follow throughout the war. The Army of the Potomac, which fights for the North, and then the Army of Northern Virginia that fights for the South. Fort Sumter was important because it marked the beginning of the Civil War. The first shots were fired. Though it's important to note that even though the first shots were fired, there was no loss of life. Fort Sumter marks the beginning of the Civil War, the first Manassas or Bull Run. They can't even decide how to name their battles. Becomes the first battle where both armies face off. The Southern Army wins this battle, but the important part about Manassas or Bull Run is that it shows that neither side is going to give up easily and that the war is going to last way longer than anticipated. After losing the Battle of Manassas, McDowell was replaced with McClellan to lead the Army of the Potomac. McClellan decides to take the battle to Richmond, the Confederate capital. Lee stops McClellan and the Army of the Potomac of their goal of laying siege to Richmond during the spring and summer of 1862, and McClellan retreats defeated. Lee, hoping to take advantage of the Union's low morale, decides to push the Army of Northern Virginia north across the Potomac and into Maryland, where the Confederacy could bring the war into the Union. While marching north, after the Confederates had abandoned a campsite, McClellan's army moved in. Union soldiers found detailed Confederate troop movements wrapped around 3 cigars and accidentally dropped by a Southern officer. McClellan now knows the battle plan and that Lee had split his troops, but he was slow to act and did not take advantage. And that time allowed the Army in Northern Virginia to gather and prepare for the battle in Union territory. Fought on September 17, 1862, Antietam, also known as Sharpsburg, was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history with over 23,000 casualties in roughly 12 hours. The battle ended the Confederate invasion of the North and resulted in a Union victory. But McClellan did not pursue Lee, and for that he was fired by Lincoln, and yet another Union general would be given a chance to try to defeat Lee sometime in the future. It led to President Abraham Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation September 22, 1862. This would be a good time to hit the pause button and look at some of the battles and their results. When you are done with this slide, hit play, then pause again on the next slide. After the fighting took place from April 1861 to June 1863, the Union, with seemingly unlimited resources, was losing almost every major battle against the Army of Northern Virginia. Both sides were starting to believe that Lee was invincible. General Meade was the next general to lead the Army of the Potomac. Robert E. Lee decides to invade the North and force an immediate end of the war. This sets up one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. For 3 days, Lee attacked the Union defensive positions unsuccessfully. More than 50,000 men fell. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought on July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, was the turning point of the Civil War for one main reason: it had failed. The collision between the two great armies at Gettysburg put an end to the audacious plan. Lee limped back into the South. Meade fails to end Lee once and for all, missing the opportunity, then he is replaced for Grant, setting up the match we've all been waiting for, Lee versus Grant. Though this is the end of the video, there is so much more to each of these battles we covered, not to mention all the battles we didn't even discuss today. So the challenge is for you to go deeper in the battles that interest you. See if you can find the importance of the battle beyond the shooting.